Welcome to the Remarkable Life podcast. I'm your host and coach, Caryn Gillen. And today we are looking out by having someone who is brave enough to come on and get coached. And this is Charlene Lam. And I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us who you are.
Oh, yay for being brave.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. Hi, I'm Charlene. I am a certified grief coach and the founder of the Grief Gallery. And my mother died in 2013, really suddenly. And at that time, I leaned into my own creativity to help me cope.
Mm.
And when I decided to help other people with their grief, I really incorporate that experience of using creativity and in particular the lens or practice even of curating into my grief work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's partly what I want to ask you about. But I'm
Okay.
originally from New York City and I'm now based in Lisbon in Portugal.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you for sharing all that. I have a really practical question first, because
Yeah.
when I'm coaching people, sometimes I'm like, you have to feel your feelings or lean into the emotion or lean into your creativity, is what you said. And when you say that to people, is there a practical explanation of what that means, just so we can all know?
Yeah. This is part of my question for you
Okay,
of, is
perfect.
it enough to just say I'm a grief coach? How
Mm,
much of my own story, how specific do I need to be about one, who I work with and who I want to work with, and my particular approach?
mm-hmm,
Because notice I said, oh, I'm a certified grief coach and the founder of the Grief Gallery. Some people are going to hear the Grief Gallery and they're going to hear curating and they're going to say, I love that. I totally know what curating is. I love museums and art. I want to find out more. And other people are going to say, but I'm not a creative. Can I still do this? What do you mean by curating?
mm-hmm.
And I've worked with people who are the whole span of that. And I can work with people across that whole spectrum. So, how specific
Yeah,
do I need to get?
yeah. Well, at times like these, I like to ask, is it working? Is what you're saying working? And how would we know?
Mm. It's working in that it does attract people that I love speaking to and I love working with. So, my people are the people who hear curating and are at least curious about it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of my favorite clients have said, oh, yeah, no, when I heard you give a talk and you talked about your experience of losing your mother and how you curated an exhibition about her as a way to like sort through the belongings that she left behind, that really resonated with me. That's a task that I'm facing. Or I have a bunch of objects that I feel really, really attached to. So my favorite people really do resonate with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I can help people beyond that too.
Yeah. Yeah. And at a certain point, it's like, how many words do I need for people to feel my energy and understand I can help them?
Mm, yeah. Because I've
What would
certainly
you
had,
have?
yeah.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking of the other end of the spectrum of that, of some people just need to hear grief coach. And that's
Right.
enough to spark in them, oh, I have been looking for support and what I'm trying isn't working. Often my clients are already working with a therapist or have been, and they say, I'm in therapy, but I don't think it's helping.
Great. That's so specific.
So in that case, all they hear is, oh, grief coach, that's not something I've tried before.
Mm-hmm.
Let me learn more.
So
And
for
I
that, you
think,
have two
go
groups
ahead.
of folks. Are those the people who also identify with the creative side? Or is that just like, I'm on this journey, she's an option, let's go figure it out?
Think those folks are a bit more on that side where they just know they need more help. And I've
Mm-hmm.
had people book consults who haven't even checked out my website,
Yeah.
know nothing about my personal story, versus the other people who resonated so much with my personal story.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's all normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's no right way or wrong way to do this. I think it's just in the way that I'm doing, am I getting the result that I want? And it sounds
Mhm.
like you're getting a couple different results. How do you
Yeah.
feel about each of those?
Like one of my big values is helping people.
Okay.
So I think part of that is I ask myself, well, I do want to help as many people as I can. And if they want to work with me, great. I think for now it's working. And if I was to say, okay, what's my big dream vision? It would be working with people where we bring in this concept of curating, not even curating an exhibition, but just saying using the lens of curating and bringing in that metaphor and using a lot of metaphors. So I would say the people that I work with have to at least be willing and ideally excited to try out different metaphors and
Mm-hmm.
some creative exercises.
Yeah. Okay. This feels like one of those things I'm going to say, and people are going to be like, what?
Okay, awesome.
Sometimes I think wanting to help a lot of people can be something that we hide behind.
Mm,
Like this, it sort of feels like, but I want to help a lot of people. So that means I can say yes to a lot of low impact, low skill, low zone of genius work for me because I'm
mhm.
helping. So I can kind of like hide in it. It's like, it's pretty good, but it's not great.
It sounds virtuous.
Right. Exactly. Sounds real nice.
Yeah. I I think if I think of the spectrum of what lights me up, that I'm always willing to talk about grief and loss, right? All kinds of grief and loss. So even non-death related.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm willing to, but it's not, well, it kind of sounds funny to say for grief, but of my happy place, like I really get lit up when we're talking about the dead people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, I love hearing about people's dead people and their relationships with them and like what they
Yeah.
want their relationships to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then I really, really get excited when we get to talk about the dead people and physical objects and why those
Mm-hmm.
are meaningful and being able to use those meaningful objects as a way to really visualize and untangle what's happening with their grief.
Okay. I'm seeing this individual. It's like you have the dead in one circle, you have their stuff in another circle, and you
Mhm.
have the coaching in another circle.
Mm.
And that sweet spot in the middle is where this curation and creativity and like where that all comes together. Because can you curate? You go ahead.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of yes and.
Yeah. Say
Right.
all the ands.
Yes. And not everyone has physical stuff.
Yeah.
Or, but and that's the thing when people say, oh, but I need physical things, I need the belongings in order to curate.
Mm,
And no, my whole take on it is you don't need the belongings to curate. You can curate with things that remind you of them. You can
hmm.
even curate with none of those things. Because
Yeah.
especially as coaches, we know it's not actually about the physical objects.
Right. So this is where metaphor is big.
Yeah. But I'm finding that as I'm experimenting with different ways to talk about it, that people get confused, where they think, oh, I'm going
Mm,
to help them physically sort through the things in their
hmm.
person's house. I am not a professional organizer. Or they think, oh, I'm going to teach them how to curate an exhibition about their loved one.
Hmm.
And yes, that's a possibility. Yes, that's an option. Yes, that was my personal expression of how to use creativity and this lens of curating for my mom's house. But that's not what I actually do with people.
Yeah. So in an ideal world where somebody came in and they had that focus and openness to metaphor and curation, and they were doing grief work, and you got to the end of the work,
Mhm.
what's there for them then? What happens?
That either they feel light enough and ready to curate on their own, meaning to make choices on their own, and to even if they want to put together like a gallery or some kind of creative work that's in tribute to their person. Or I would love a premium offer where it's like, okay, now that we've sifted through all of it, sorted through all of the not positive things, all of the things that feel heavy and ugly, now we can actually curate together an exhibition or display some other tribute to your person. And I actually fly out there and help them do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I really see that as like a premium, very small number of people a year kind of offer.
Yeah. The alumni offer.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. Like
Yeah,
that's not marketed to the public. That's once we've done this initial work, we could do
yeah.
this other thing. Yeah.
That's the Netflix
Okay.
show version. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it.
But there's so many other people that I know I can help just by going through those creative exercises and offering these different ways of seeing the physical objects and different ways of seeing their grief, different ways
Mhm.
of seeing their loved one and the other people in their lives where most of the
Yeah.
conflict tends to be.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So there's the ideal way you help, and then there's the people who you can help.
Mhm.
And then there's how do we have a business that's sustainable? And how do we not get confused by what we're doing to sustain things as we grow what is really the most impactful thing for us? So I think I see it as like this decrescendo crescendo. It's like we have all the people who come in and we work with, we learn a lot about who we are, who our ideal client is, and how we want to package things.
Mhm.
And then we have a better idea about this is this unicorn type of client who I really want to do the majority of my work with. Do I have enough of them to have a sustainable practice? And I don't know where you're at or if you want to share. But then that there's the work of, okay, I'm going to do all kinds of grief work because I don't have the amount of unicorn that I want to have right now. And that's okay. And it's a part of my business growth and I'm going to do it. And I like helping people. So it works for me. And it's where are you at in the slowing of one and the ramping up of the other, to make business and life work for you and get closer to the language you really are talking about wanting to use.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I don't think I have enough unicorns currently because the unicorns also include people who can afford to work with me on that level.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I hold a free monthly grief gathering, and it's so fun. It's like
Yeah.
it's not a typical support group. I share my approach, which is called curating grief. And I really kind of position it as a monthly gathering for the grief gallery because it is with that lens of pretending you're in a gallery space and imagining what you would choose to share in that gallery space about your person. And I love it. And people really get it. And I get really nice notes about the impact of it. And I think it also functions as my free offer
Mm-hmm.
of saying, okay, it's okay for me to charge more premium prices because I have plenty that's free, including this free
Mm-hmm.
monthly gathering.
Yep.
So I think I have a lot of people who resonate with the message and can see how they can apply that lens of curating to themselves and their situations. And they're not necessarily the people who can afford to work with me one to one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, I have people who have never been to my website who sign up to work with me.
Mhm.
That's true for me too. They're not on my newsletter list. They haven't been to my website. They came because someone said, I think you should talk to Caryn, or I think you should talk to Charlene.
Yeah.
Right. So there's what we do to nurture and show up and stay top of mind. And then there's how the clients come in. And sometimes these things don't feel related at all, but they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't have to change a thing, but you came here to have this conversation for some reason. So what is it you're looking for exactly?
Well, I guess part of it is, do I have a problem? But
I can't tell yet.
yeah.
Do you think you have a problem?
Well, I'm definitely spending a lot of time considering this and thinking about this. I think part of the adjusting is when is getting feedback that people think I'm actually going to be teaching them how to curate an exhibition,
Hmm.
like actually step by step, um, or that people think I kind of do what a professional organizer does.
Right.
That to me was a clue that, okay, maybe I'm leaning a bit too much into my personal story versus like what they want help with.
Right. Well,
Um,
unless what they want help with is a personal organizer or an art curator.
yeah. And I'm not a
Yeah.
professional organizer.
Right. So are you having a lot of people come to calls with you, sales consultation calls, and not be a great fit?
Actually, no.
Okay. So do you have a consultation close rate of 50% or greater?
Yeah.
Like half the people who get on the phone with you end up working with you?
Yes.
Okay. So then that would tell me, based on industry standard, that nothing is broken.
Okay.
But if you still have that feeling, like, um, do you feel like you're wasting time talking to a lot of the wrong people?
No, I think I've gotten more discerning
Okay.
about who I'm talking to and what I'm talking about. I think my approach is to do a lot of research
Uh-huh.
and to listen to a lot of people. And my background's in journalism, and I'm kind of like, well, interesting. So and so says this, and so says this. And so there are a lot of different opinions. And as we know with
Uh-huh.
online business, there are a lot of opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right. But the only one that really matters is yours.
I don't know. That's a practice of saying like,
Yeah.
oh, there isn't one blueprint I
Right.
need to be following, right?
Yeah. There's no
Uh,
one great opinion that guides this. It really is this conversation between you and your business and what wants to happen in your business and what is the market showing you about what it wants and needs, and what are all these individual people bringing that lights you up or shuts you down, and how can you lean into speaking more about what lights you up and less about the things they bring that shut you down.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I have made a lot of progress in there
Mm-hmm.
where uh, the bubbles that we're in, right? When you're a coach and you're all in the coaching circles, you think everyone's a coach. I've been building my grief networks, my grief professional networks in the last year, and it seems like, oh, everyone's working in grief. Uh, so it's
Nope.
been right? Like, oh, and then I had someone ask me, what's a grief coach? I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, not everyone's in my bubble. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I do
Yeah.
see that I don't want to recreate the grief content that's already out there where people are
Yeah.
talking generally about grief. I do want to really focus on the content that I put out being my particular take on grief. I do use a lot of metaphors beyond just the curating metaphor. So anything that I put out there, I want it to really show my way because I think the people I work with and the people I want to work with also want to do it differently.
Mm-hmm. Do their grief differently.
Yeah, that they're kind of like me in some ways, where they say, you know what, I went to a grief support group and it really bummed me out.
Mm-hmm. So they're individual, they're creative, they're interested, they're coachable.
Yeah.
They're
They want to
curious.
feel better,
Uh-huh.
right? Yes, they
Yeah.
want to talk about how their person died, and they want to talk about how their person lived.
Mm-hmm.
And they're interested in how do they want to live their life now.
Right. In the after.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
what is their life after loss. And that's what coaching is so brilliant for.
Right. So it's really an exploration you take people on. It sounds like you're saying enough things to get people to come in and raise their hand and say, I think it might be beneficial for me to work with you. And
Yeah.
that's great. And go ahead.
I think it's the um when people who say, oh no, what you're saying is confusing, or you need to get more specific.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then right, then we ask like who's actually saying that?
Right. Is that someone who would actually be a great client, or is that just someone who doesn't get it because they would never actually benefit from the work with you?
I think it's a different context where I've been working on my book. So I've been getting consultations with book agents and other people. And I think what I'm concluding is maybe for the book, I need to be super specific and super clear about who the book is for and what the
Mm-hmm.
book promises
Yes.
versus what I talk about on social media or on my website or just generally in terms of how I
Yeah.
work with people in grief.
Well, and you want to be different. So you need to be specific. Like there's a lot of books on grief that will talk about the stages and things and the process and the whatever. And it sounds like that's not the book you want to write because you want to do different work from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you were to write the most different kind of book that would light you up and point to your work in the clearest way, what would be the point of that book?
Well, the current vision that actually does make sense to me is that it's actually a workbook.
Uh-huh.
It's a curating grief workbook that weaves in a bit of my story and my experience with losing my mother and dealing with her belongings. But then it weaves in other people's stories who had different circumstances where they were a kid when they lost their person. So they don't actually have anything left.
Mm-hmm.
And what now? And then it has different exercises, creative exercises for people.
Cool. Okay. So when you say curating grief, to me, that sounds like a journey more than an exhibition. Like you
Mm.
want to take people on journeys of curation.
Mm. Yeah, that's other feedback that I've gotten that some people are like, I don't know what curating grief means.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're
It's a great
saying?
word. Like people, I love that word, and I hear people love that word a lot. And like to curate is such a caretaking thing. It's a very thoughtful process, right? And so you're saying, I want people to have this really amazing, thoughtful grief process or journey that gets them somewhere. But people just associate that word with the art world, oftentimes.
Mm.
It's not wrong. But what I just want to get clearly for both of us is if you're going to be really explicit about what you do and what you don't do for people's benefit, what would you say? Like, this is for who?
Well, the working title, that's the thing, right? We're talking about the book now, right?
We're talking about your work in general.
Oh, okay. It's it's not the physical stuff out ultimately. It's choosing what to keep and bring forward after you experience significant loss, usually in the context of losing a person. It's about making space for grief. It's about making space for what's really important, which can look like making physical space because maybe all the boxes of their things are taking up room in your life, or you're spending a lot of money on a storage unit,
Mhm.
or it looks like their, what I call like their head space and their heart space are really kind of taken over by how the person died and some of that really painful aspect of losing them, or some of the
Mm-hmm.
conflicts that happened versus how they really want to remember their person. That's what the work
Okay.
is really about.
Okay. That's really clear. The only thing that it sounds like it's not is that it's just not just about the stuff.
No, it's not.
Yeah. So there's a lot that's you're including in this work that you do. The only thing you're excluding is it's not only about the stuff.
So is that
Do
what
you
I need to
ex-
say more clearly?
I think so. Because it's really the one thing that's coming through because it keeps being like, but I'm not going to clean out your house and I'm not going to put on a show with you. And it's not just about the stuff. And I want to work in metaphor and I want to talk about representation of stuff and felt experience versus actual things. So I think making that line really clear is going to be helpful for people because stuff is such a big part of when people move on.
Yeah,
So I can see why we're going to bring that baggage with us really easily and why you're going to have to be very clear about it's not just about the stuff.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
not just about the stuff. And then does it confuse it if I say, but your experience of the stuff and your current relationship with it is actually going to reveal so much about your relationship with grief and your
Yeah.
relationship with the person.
Because that's the stuff around the stuff, not the stuff.
Right.
So our work is about the stuff around the stuff of loss, the
Hmm.
stories around the piles and the boxes, the
Yeah.
heartstrings between you and the person that sometimes feel like they're attached to all those totes.
Yes. Attached
Yeah.
is the wording I use. Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
no, it's really the stories and the memories and the meanings attached to the stuff.
Yeah. So we do everything relating to your grief, including what's attached to the stuff, but we don't deal with the actual stuff.
Yeah. Unless it's that premium offer where we are
Yeah.
potentially.
Right. Yeah. And maybe sometime you want to float that as not like the old, like bring that to the front stage and make an offer that's very clearly about the stuff and curating a show and see what happens. Because it could be
Mm.
that you've primed up this beautiful audience of people who are waiting for you to say, I'm here to help you curate a show based on your loved one's belongings. I don't know if we know that yet.
That was one of my first ahas when I was interviewing a widow, and she's like, yeah, my husband had an amazing collection of art. I would love to curate an exhibition with his art.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, that's not actually what I was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I think that you just have to be really explicit about the stuff versus the
Mhm.
stuff around the stuff.
Like that. The stuff around
Mm-hmm.
the stuff attached to the stuff.
Yeah. And I might, if I were you, experiment with using the word curate and not using it because we do
Mhm.
attach it so much to the art thing.
Yeah.
Like, is it clear for people when I go for 2 weeks and don't use the word curate and any of my content out there, what changes and how people show up or in what they're commenting on, liking, reaching out about?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Because I think you appreciate art, right? I think you've
Yeah.
mentioned you appreciate art and craftsmanship. And I think some people associate curating with, oh yeah, I curate my Spotify list.
Yeah.
So they don't associate with art at all.
Yeah. Right. It's more of just an action of organization.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we do have to contend with what people define the words we use as, eh, or, well, and define them for them. So if you want to keep the word curate, you need to pound it into your branding about like, this is what curation means. This is what curation means. And say it so many times that you're really sick of saying it, but other people will finally get it. Like, in this context, this is what she means by curate.
Yeah. Yeah, in personal story, to me, it means curating an exhibition. But for application for
Yeah.
coaching, we're
Yep.
saying curating means choosing with intention.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so it could be really useful to get 2 or 3 client stories and kind of
Mhm.
write the client's journey and how they use curation that had nothing to do with an art exhibit at the end, so that you aren't only sharing this one example of curation that does turn into art.
Yeah, I can see that being really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. It's nuanced, right? Like grief. Yeah. But I think that, like, well, let's hear from you. What are your main takeaways right now?
One, that what I'm doing now doesn't have to be what I'm ultimately doing, right? That yes, maybe down the line, I'm only working with people who want to curate an exhibition and really want to go deep on exploring the meaning of meaningful objects.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, it makes sense for me to work with a broader range of grief. Like this year, I'm facilitating some other people's grief retreats and working in other people's kind of projects and businesses as well. And of course, that's going to be with their approach.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to try to cram my approach into it.
Right.
So seeing that as a way of, okay, great, that makes sense for what I'm doing right now, learning, fueling what I eventually might want to focus on as I build my own thought leadership and intellectual property around my approach. And I need to be way more explicit about what I'm
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah. I think it's helpful for everyone. Like everyone listening, just think about where can I be more explicit with what I'm doing and who I'm doing it for. It never hurts.
Yeah. Because I say
Mhm.
I mean curating means choosing with intention. And I'll say it
Mhm.
once, but it sounds like, oh no, that needs to be put everywhere
And
and
make your own,
say,
like expand on that. Curating grief means
mm,
choosing with intention how whatever you're going to say, but like make that longer definition and own that as your intellectual property. Curating grief, write that blog post, have that be your, like, have that one indexed on the Google searches. Make sure that's
mhm.
your property.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And being really explicit, it's
Mhm.
not just about the stuff.
That could be your new tagline.
I am not Marie Kondo. This is not what we're
Right.
doing.
I do want a Netflix special. I am not Marie Kondo.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome. Okay. So we've got your takeaways. I just want to thank you for showing up and being willing to have this conversation out loud with people listening, because I think it always helps other people on the outside world see the insides of someone else's mind.
I appreciate it because from this end, it always just feels like, oh no, I'm just talking in circles now. And I don't know that any of this makes any sense.
Yeah, you make sense. Yeah, we all make sense. And we all need that reflection and that space to like dump the basket out and sort through it and see what we want to keep and what we want to get rid of so we can curate our minds about whatever the issue is that we're bringing to coaching.
Yeah, that's the whole
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I want to thank Charlene again for being here and being willing to be coached. Her information, in case you are interested in curating grief, is in the show notes. You can find her on Instagram and I'm sure all the other places. And I want to just take a minute and reflect on what we were able to talk about today, because this was a more meandery one, right? We got to kind of, some sessions are like that. You just got to get the lay of the land for a while before you can hone in on what wants to happen. And that's okay. We don't always have to be in such a rush, right? And I think what's really clear is that for all of us, we are the ones who decide what is working or not. That job is ours to do, not other people's to decide for us. If you're working a job, sure, they're going to set out what works for your job. But you in your life, or you, if you are running your business, it's your job to decide this is what's working. And I want to check in on things when it feels like this or this, because that feels like maybe it won't be working anymore. But you have to set those markers, and you can, and you get to, and it's a gift because then we get to ultimately feel satisfaction. So, in her case, that was like everything's actually working, but she's at a point where she can choose to be more specific. She can choose to test some things to see if maybe the results will become more impactful. And that is a fun place to be. It can also be kind of confusing and a little bit scary because you don't know, does that mean that some things are going to stop happening before other things start happening? But again, you get to decide, does that mean it works or not? And the other thing we talked about a lot was being explicit. Let's be super clear as we can be. I am not the queen of clarity for myself. I do believe in being as clear as we can be. And if you know, and I get this one a lot, so I'll share this. I end up coaching a lot of people who are very, I'll say spiritual, if not faithful or religious, but have a strong faith, and they use it in all aspects of their life. They're very committed to it. It's a big part of who they are. And the question is, when do I bring that into my business? Or is it okay to bring that into my business? Or can I bring that into my business? And I think the answer for me is usually like, if this is who you are, it's going to come out anyway. So let's just be explicit about it. Like, I don't have an explicit thing that I'm a religious person, because I'm not. But if you are, you can say that. This is your business. You make the rules. You get to be who you are. And for some people, that'll mean that they're no. They're like, I'm not going to work with you. But for plenty of other people, that means they're going to be a yes. But for you, it means you're going to be able to work for more alignment. And alignment is magnetic. So more people will find you no matter what. So just remember that if you're doing your own thing and you want to be who you are, you want to make a big impact and have it be sticky, bring your whole self as much as you can if it feels safe. All right. Thanks for being here. I just really love getting to do these coaching sessions for the podcast, and I'm glad you got to listen. Don't forget to leave us a review. Thank you.